And welcome to episode 13 of SPCs Unleashed. Tonight we are moving on from 2 weeks ago. We talked about agile teams of teams. Last week, June 2 got in the way of our stream. But tonight we're talking about develop on cadence, release on demand. And Stephan is our host. So take us away, Stephan.
Welcome and happy Easter. We're on an Easter egg hunt and we'll explore the why of this dimension by learning from Mark what learning has to do with it. We will listen to Niko why plans are not selling your soul by signing a contract. And I'm looking to Ali. We hopefully can crack your ultimate puzzle. So before we start, let me give you a quick introduction into this dimension, which belongs to the Agile Product Delivery core competency. And with this competency, we're always talking about creating opportunities for sustained market and service leadership. We want to be ahead. We want to stay ahead. So if you look into the dimension, there's two parts. There's develop on cadence. And the why behind it is how do we find a flow-based system that really creates those opportunities in a fast, synchronized way so that we can deliver value. And then moving to the second part of this dimension called release on demand. Release on demand, a capability which is kind of a strategic advantage if you can push the button at any time and release value when it's needed, when product management determines it, so that we can anticipate it. So we know when to release, what to release, and we also are aware of who is affected by such a release. So let me jump to my mates in the room. Guys, what is your true passion? What's your thinking when it comes to this dimension? And let's start with Ali because we have to crack a puzzle. Ali, shoot.
Yes. Morning, evening, afternoon, good night, whomever is looking at the screen. Today, talking about flow, and as sort of to follow the trail of thought from the previous episodes as well, I'll be talking a little bit about teams who develop hardware, where there is just a sort of an additional constraint in working in short cycles, delivering quickly, evaluating work quickly, learning and integrating quickly. It becomes much more difficult. Why? Because an electrical module has different components, and that means it's built by people with different backgrounds. We call them, and I call them engineering disciplines. So you have a mechanical engineer who, for instance, creates an enclosure, like a housing of a little device. That is a skill in itself. And then you have somebody else who is building the electronic parts. That is the wiring, a PCB, a battery module. That is a different skill in itself. And then you have people that are developing the software or the firmware or the embedded software, how you want to call it. Into the, let's say, the PCB, the digital component, and adding functionality to it. All of them have a different, completely different background, and unfortunately also a different sort of delivery cadence. So the challenge is, how do you blend all of that together? Because we all know that upon integration, you learn. And you also learn, therefore, what doesn't work. And I think that's the whole point of integrating and doing that very fast. So the thing is, how can you challenge the sort of the way people are operating at the moment within the physical boundaries? Because you can't have an outer housing enclosure that normally takes a few weeks to make. To be ready within 2 days, or can it? Because that's, I think, the point. We're trying to create a puzzle and solve it by finding pieces and actually challenging every piece to put together a module that is integratable, that makes sense, that is testable or verifiable in a very short cycle, even though that is not the way people are used to operate. So that's the story that I'll be talking about.
Big passion about integration and learning, which leads me to Mark. Your passion, Mark.
So I got to tell you, my passion's a lot shorter than Ali's, because I'm going to save the stories for later.
Oh, good.
Look, I would summarize it. I'd say I love Cadence as a driver of learning, and I love eliminating the need for it even more. And, if you think of Cadence, and Ali talked about integration, there's an element of Cadence which is also human integration. You put things on rhythm and you force conversations and you force integration of what's happening for a group of humans. But the more that you are continuously integrating your human interaction, the less you need Cadence to force you to do it, and the more you find amazing flow. So there's a really interesting tension between the two.
I guess we will pick up this thread very soon. So, Niko, what went through your head preparing this episode?
So I realized about myself, I love to, oh, now my English is gone. I love to irritate people sometimes. And because it sounds very technical, this dimension, I thought, okay, I have to say a surprise for me was when I started with Steve, this dimension is the surprising part was when you do release on demand, you do develop on Cadence, it has an impact on the private life, it has an impact of income, has a lot of impacts on a personal life, and that's maybe the surprise, irritation part.
Very interesting. Guys, I have to admit, when I prepared this episode, I thought that's an easy one. Let's talk about a little bit about cadence, a rhythm, and releasing, and done, right? The more I dived into it, the more I was surprised what popped up as facets. And you guys already mentioned some of these items. So yeah, let's go into it. Let's dive into what is develop on cadence. Just to remind us, it's about a regular and predictive rhythm. So what is the focus and what is the scope of this regular predictive rhythm? And when I read the notes, let's start with Niko. What are your thoughts when it comes to this developer cadence? Who is affected? What does it do with us? Because you mentioned it's a personal thing in the end, right? It's not only professional life, it might affect us all in a certain way.
Yeah, try to find the cadence. It's not a cadence of the cadence of a team of 12 teams. There are many people there. Try to find the cadence when to start an iteration, when to finish an iteration. Do you have part-time workers? Can you start Monday or can you finish Friday? I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Switzerland, usually Monday, Friday, you have part-timers, usually fathers who take a longer weekend. So they finish a Thursday, they start Tuesday the week. So can you start on Monday? Can you finish Friday? Okay, let's do Wednesday. It's in the middle. Yeah, Wednesday is also special in Switzerland. The first years, the kids don't have school at Wednesday afternoon. So whenever you have 90% people working, you cannot use the Wednesday, or you have to squeeze it everything in the morning. The finishing, the retro, the review part, and then the planning. So try really to find a good cadence which works for everybody. You will not. So you have to find the first compromise, and you will have people not being happy. So this is one of the challenge. Another one I had. That's a fun story. It was a team of very young people. It was really like a startup group. It was really a modern company. And what I had there, I don't know if it's because they were young or what it was, but they forgot every weekend what they have to do the next week. You couldn't do a 2-week iteration because they come back like from a coma or from I don't know what they did during the weekends. But at the
I
end,
can
we
have a
had
I might
guess.
have an idea.
yeah. I was young then too, but I don't remember me being that wild. So we had to shorten the whole cadence thing to a week because they were not able to work after Friday. They came back to, oh, what have I committed? I have no idea. Oh, let's give it a new try. And so we changed the cadence. So it's really working with people, finding time iteration where they still can remember what they committed, finding a start slot where they're able to start and finish. There's a lot. Sorry, it's a lot of people work.
So listening to you, Niko, what pops up for me here is adaptability, right? And this adaptability in a flow system is probably a challenge. So moving to Ali, this challenge, you kind of noted some stuff down, which is really interesting for me. Could you take over,
Well,
please? When it comes to the flow system.
absolutely. The challenge that I have at the moment is why am I not living in Switzerland? Because we have a long weekend. The Wednesdays are relaxed.
Come on
and
over,
during the
come on
weekend, you
over.
forget all of your problems. I love it.
No taxes.
Even that, oh my God. No, so going back to your question, Stefan, the regular and predictive rhythm. So I do like that term, a regular and predictive rhythm. What I figured out is that, and I'm going to slightly paraphrase Mark actually in here, because what I like about the regular and predictive rhythm as part of a flow system is it becomes a routine, and routine aligns people. In the beginning, building a routine is very annoying. I mean, going to the gym, or if you do some other sports, or cleaning your car every Saturday. I don't know, that's it's annoying. It's very annoying to start with it, but eventually it just becomes part of your life. And I think the same applies whenever you have a team that just works, collaborates together. Just your colleagues that somehow need a little bit of sort of a handshake amongst each other on how to collaborate. But as part of the DevOps handbook, a book from Dubois, Humble, and Gene Kim, in there they also talk about sort of another flow. They talk about a flow of knowledge. I think it was the third type of flow or something like that. I read the book a while back, but in that book they talk therefore about a flow of knowledge, a flow that goes upstream and downstream. That means you generate information and knowledge upon integration, and you would like to share that information to people that are not necessarily directly involved to integration. That could be people that are from sales or marketing, that are all the way at the beginning of an operational value stream, so that they also understand what works and what doesn't work. The flow of knowledge, that sort of that concept is actually a very interesting one. And how do you organize an organic thing like a group of people that never has time, is ill, works in different offices, has all of these logistical issues to get together? Well, to agree a common cadence. And a common cadence via call, via a physical face-to-face get-together, or anything else. But the cadence, it generates known moments of forced interaction. And the challenge is, of course, to make it as smoothly as possible, so that's it's efficient, it's short, everyone gets their information in the least amount of time as necessary, so you don't block everyone's agenda, and have in a way forced moments of knowledge exchange. And I mean, in the world of hardware, that is as important as everywhere else. You have people that speak sort of different languages: mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, software, industrial, let's say industrialization, authors, and so forth and so forth. So finding ways to connect these people, to share knowledge in a very concise way, and doing that using a trick, because that's essentially what this cadence is. It's a trick, an agreement for collaboration. It just makes collaboration easy. Let's just keep it there.
I already love this episode. We're definitely on an Easter egg hunt. So we talked about this cadence. We talked about the different people. You, Ali, brought at the table not only the flow system and the flow of information and material, you introduced us to value streams, and we are probably aware that a value stream always starts with a trigger or triggers, and that's a different perspective. And I would like to hand over to Mark because you mentioned that in the preparation. What about this trigger when it comes to the value stream?
So I warned you guys at the end of the last episode, I was going to feel naughty this episode, and I'm going to feel naughty because I love Cadence and I hate Cadence. Right? I'll just go straight there. If you look at this through a purely lean lens and you look at something like a sprint or a PI, it's a batching mechanism for introduction of work to the system, right? So what's your trigger? The thing that triggers the introduction of new work is this batching mechanism called a sprint or a PI. And in the beginning, that can be super powerful, right? And a couple of things come out of it. One is it goes, I've got some rhythm, therefore I'm going to shrink things down to small enough to fit inside the rhythm. So there's a bit of a forcing function to go get smaller. There's a value in terms of going, if we've got complex interdependencies, we get a chance at the beginning of that batching mechanism to actually understand more holistically the impact of that work that's been introduced. In fact, a feature of PI planning that spans teams. My favorite example for this in the story is an organization. When I started working with them, they'd been running Scrum for a little while, and they went, it's not really working. And I looked and I went, well, problem's not necessarily a scaling problem. You've got this issue that says every sprint you start 3 really large stories, and if you're lucky, you finish one of them. And we spent 6 months going, let's use this idea of sprint as cadence to actually see if you can get to the point where you finish the things you take into the sprint. And, in story sizing, they would take in probably 2 40s and an 80. That was their standard thing that went in. And it was like, all right, we had PI planning that helped with cross-team dependencies because, of course, they had separate testers and all those fun things. And we shrank and shrank and shrank to the point where we got things inside the sprint boundary. And then once they're inside the sprint boundary, I was like, could we do smaller stories, right? And, we got smaller to get there. And then, they were starting to run reasonably small stories. And I said, how about we talk about WIP limits? And so we threw WIP limits in. And they started working on less small stories at once, right? Batching. And in the beginning, they'd taken these stories and split them small to get in the sprint. And then a dev had basically stapled 10 stories together and go, it's more efficient for me to work on them at the same time. So, we shrunk the batch to the cadence window. Then we went, well, let's stop developers stapling stories together. And we went to WIP limits. And then after a little bit over a year, they turned around to me one day and they said, Mark, the sprint just feels like a batching mechanism, right? We get towards
it is. Sorry.
And I'm like, oh, we're ready to talk about Kanban. We've got the idea of WIP going. We've got small regulated batches flowing through the system. Let's start thinking about Kanban. And along the way, of course, they changed a lot of their work habits in terms of how they worked as a team. And they'd done a lot of cross-skilling to reduce kind of interdependencies inside the team. They'd played with team boundaries to reduce cross-team dependencies. And then they got to this point of going, you know what? How about we limit WIP for features as well as stories? So no team works on more than one feature at a time. And by this stage, of course, the teams could fully self-do features. And, along the way, they'd made a whole bunch of architectural changes to decouple things to enable them to release independently. And eventually they got to the point of like, we don't really need to plan. We've got all this data that says we know the lead time of a feature. And we don't actually size stories anymore because it's small enough or it's too big. And we understand life by counting stories better than by counting points. And their planning basically involved look at a new feature, t-shirt size it and go, okay, we know how many sprints that is because of our data. And, by this stage, the rest of the company, they were running, it was a smaller company. They ran the whole company as a train. So they had their sales and marketing and ops teams and learning teams and consulting teams all going to PI planning because they needed to integrate their go-to-market plan. The dev teams turned up to PI planning for an hour to go, this is when the features are dropping. And that was literally the entirety of PI planning for them because they'd eliminated the need for the forcing function of the cadence. And this, I think, is a really if you ever look at batch, right? Because if you think about these are batching mechanisms, if you look at batch theory, you look at a U curve. And the U curve talks about the holding cost, right? As the batch gets bigger, there's an impact. And it talks about the transaction cost. And as the transaction cost gets lower, the batch size can shrink economically. So, what do you do to get towards flow and get rid of batching? Well, you fix the things that drive the transaction cost, right? What's the expense of getting people on the same page? And how many people do we need on the same page at any given time to move forward? If you can fix those, then you can get to flow and reduce the need for cadence. But the chicken and egg situation is you need cadence to force you to look at all of those questions. And then it's when you respond to them that you need cadence less.
And about 1.5 year of patience.
Yeah, that was about 18 months, that journey, from some teams that really leant in.
Yeah.
We just listened to an awesome lecture of how to apply cadence over a time of 18 months. Thank you very much, Mark. That was awesome, right? So let me kind of move us into a different perspective. We as change agents, not only helping the teams and the team of agile teams apply this cadence and develop in their cadence, we also are aware that we have, and it's stated in the articles, we have an inherent variability in product discovery and development. So a plan, what is a plan? Niko, what are your thoughts about that one? Planning, plans, and inherent variability.
Yeah, what I see often outside when starting with lean with agile, they still have the mindset of we have to agree on something, to commit on something, and this is what we're gonna deliver. And I have to tell them, plan is not a contract. You are not obliged to bring it, or you don't make a confidence vote and then it's death, or a confidence vote or death. It has several parts of the confidence vote. It's also part of when something bad happens that you say, people, we have to adjust. We have to things different. It's not a commitment which you sign up like a contract, and if you fail, you get punished. So it's really something built in the system that you are agile, that you can change, that you can be resilient, if you want to use a different word than agile, if you don't like agile. So you need something you can work iteratively. Is it the word? Now it is one.
Iteratively.
Thank you.
We went 25 minutes before the first Swinglish today, mate.
Perfect. So and in my former life, I did also trainings for requirements engineers, for business analysts, and they always told me, "Oh, it's impossible to slice. It's impossible to do that. We need better plans. We need better writings." And whenever I start working with them, we realized it was everything just an excuse or it wasn't imaginable for them that it's possible to do it. So at the end, it's built in. It's maybe you need people who just do it instead of talking about. So we are good trainers, maybe good consultants, but I had a huge impact when I worked in the role I coached, and then show them it's possible to do requirements engineering without having at the end a contract. It's possible to do MVPs. So yeah, that's one important thing. It's not a contract. It's a lean startup way we are doing together. It goes in this direction. Be also having people there. If you are not the person who works operative, because you're the coach or you're the consultant, care for having people in the team who are able to show this to the others, who are role models, who show that the lean thinking, the agile thinking is possible and brings tangible results.
Awesome. Niko, you brought up this lean thinking, and lean thinking is, in my opinion, not just being like a factory churning out output. It's more about product discovery, right? I would like to throw the ball to Mark when it comes to product discovery. In past episodes, we already talked about that. What's your thinking when it comes to coaching product discovery?
So if you think about product discovery and variability, I've been reading one of Marty Kagan's books recently, Inspired. Brilliant book. And one of the things he says again and again and again is more than 50% of your product ideas aren't going to work. And how do you find out more cheaply which ones are going to work and which ones aren't. And I think there's an interesting lens when you think about variability, because in the early days of my agile journey, I translated variability to estimation. I had lots of years as a programmer. My wife loved to talk about programmer minutes. And funnily enough, I've had some programmer minutes this week where I sat down to do something I thought would take half an hour and it's taken 8 hours. But because you're doing something new, you never know what you're going to run into. It's amazing the things you can run into that make some things you thought would be easy take a long time, and vice versa. But then there's the flip side of variability, which is the customer going to like it? Is the customer going to respond to it the way we thought they were going to respond to it? And, this notion of going, can I put myself on a rhythm that's actually driving me towards regular moments where I can get real feedback? So the reduction of the variability involved in potentially building the wrong product. And you've got to face into both kinds of variability. And I think one of the best metaphors for thinking about variability and cadence, there's a buzz phrase that was on the safe slides for years. I'm not sure if it's on the latest version, right? Drive out variability, or drive out accrued variability with cadence. And Reinertsen had a beautiful story for it. And he used to use buses as an example. I've always used trams as an example, depending on whether you have trams in your part of the world. Let's stick to buses because everybody's got buses. So the start of his story was the number of times that you wait forever for a bus to turn up, and then when a bus finally arrives, it's 3 buses back to back, right? And you go, how crazy is this? I've waited forever for my bus, and now there's not just 1 bus, but there's 3. And he tells his story about variability. He's like, what happens is that variability accumulates. So the first bus begins its route, and it begins it on time. And maybe it runs into extra red lights, it runs into a traffic jam, some stuff happens, and it starts to fall behind. So each stop it gets to a little bit later than the stop before. And then because it's late, there's more customers waiting to get on than there should have been, because there's people who've turned up to the bus stop that really should have been on the next bus. They're on this one. So it has to stop for longer to let more people get on. And so once it starts to fall behind, it falls further and further behind because the variability that's encountering is growing. The second bus that's coming behind it is driving along, and when it gets to the first bus stop, there's less passengers waiting than there should be, because some of the passengers that should have got on this bus got on the one before that was running late. So it actually gets through the bus stop faster. And what then happens is, and this is the effect scientifically that produces the syndrome of 3 buses back to back, is the accumulated variability that's been impacting all 3 of those buses, winding up with buses driving bumper to bumper through the city. And what the science has pointed people towards for this is, and I see it quite often these days when I'm on public transport, if it's running early, it waits. It waits for its scheduled departure time, and then it departs. Because when you think about optimizing the whole system rather than optimizing the single thing, you're actually using that cadence of when should I be departing from this stop as a variability control. And it's a really useful metaphor to take back into when you're thinking about managing variability with sprints and PIs, is this notion of actually building in those moments where you drive out accumulated variability.
I really like this metaphor, Mark, and that's the springboard to Ali, because we tried to solve your puzzle, right? And with this metaphor, Mark also introduced the second safe principle, systems thinking. Who's responsible for optimizing the whole system when it also comes to this inherent variability?
I'm just going to jump in for a second. I just watched Niko get ready to say something. I'm going to interrupt the flow.
Jump
Before you
in.
throw to Ali.
It's discovery time. Jump in, Niko.
Yeah, so now I destroyed your flow, Stephan. But one really important thing is, if you compare the trains in Switzerland, trains in Germany, why are they in time and the others are not? And it's really one important thing. If you want to have cadence, you need some kind of a buffer. And in Switzerland, we have this in the main stations. the trains have a buffer when they arrive late, they can start on time. And that's something they forgot, or were on the way in Germany. They don't have the buffers in the big stations. If you're late, you will be late forever. And in Switzerland, in the big stations, you have around 5 to 8 minutes buffer. And if you're late, you're on time again. And that's also one other thing next to system thinking. It's Cadence works only if you have this buffer. You need it.
Perfect. The flow goes on, and it flows to Ali.
So yeah, we can talk about our German friends because we're representing Switzerland, Netherlands, and Australia, so it's fine. But I'm not really sort of aware or not really informed about the efficiency of the bus systems anywhere, actually. No, so I took a slightly different angle when talking about the inherent variability, because over the years, and I'm really curious about all of your thoughts. Over the years, I grew really compassionate with project managers or project leads or these type of job roles. It's extremely difficult to be a project manager in a world that starts to work or maybe is already working with agile ways of working. And the amount of backlash that I get the moment that I state something about that, look, well, we work agile, we don't have project. Oh, come on, shut up. And even the fourth principle of the Agile Manifesto talks about how business people and developers need to work together daily throughout the project. The project, it's in the Agile Manifesto. So anyways,
You really
there
get
are
passionate
people
about it.
yeah, it's just I don't know how to call it. I'm going to call it. No, I'm going to say it. This is agile evangelist type of people. There's a mindset is good. A mindset is absolutely needed. Mindset will get you anywhere, but there is a step before that, which is a sort of a way to get there, agreements to get there, some form of you know what? Let's agree to work like this. That's where frameworks step in. That's where Cadence steps in. It's a how do you call it? It's a jump board. So for a jump start, it's a way to get to to have this mindset really amongst all of the people that are involved. And in big companies, you just have big change initiatives. Those big change initiatives, they are pulled, they are moved, they are people grasp them. Why? Because the entire company is not changing into agile in one go, including finance and control, compliance, and so forth. That's those people, they will have to change all kind of things whenever the rest of the company has thousands of agile teams. Then of course something needs to happen with finance, but typically that's not where you start. So typically you'd have traditional finance structures and agile teams delivering very fast, and traditional finance structures. So in between, you'd have people that try to put things together. Project managers. There's a project budget, and yes, we're talking about funding value streams, but not all companies are doing that or are there. So we still have projects. All right. So that means projects with budgets, budgets with milestones that also have contracts, because you might have a specific moment in time that you need to deliver a sort of a design to, sort of a design for a physical product to an external supplier. The external supplier has signed a contract with your company, and they are adjusting their entire manufacturing line specifically for your product. So if you are late, then there is an entire factory somewhere with all of its people, with all of its machinery running idle. So trying to, say that, well, we don't have project managers anymore because we're working agile, that's fine, but that's a hell of a burden to put on product owners, and especially in a company that has many product owners with many teams. Are they all going to sign contracts with the same supplier? So anyways, long story short, I really grew I empathize with managers. Why? Because there is still a long-term sort of milestone planning that is in place. At certain moments in time, you will have to release your product. There's a market window there. This could be done by product management. You could have project leads for this, but there are milestones. We cannot deny that. There are milestones. And based on learnings and observations, we need to adjust the scope of what we will deliver upon that milestone. So the what Cadence does, and I do like the quarterly cadence for that, because the quarterly cadence is just, there's more, let's say, big stuff, really significant changes that sort of accumulate together, that really has impact on the content of whatever you deliver. So the actual product that you deliver. On a quarterly cadence, the project lead or project manager or the product manager maybe might be constantly having to think, well, we have a milestone coming up at the end of the year, and potentially need to adjust the scope for it. But if we take something out, if we need to adjust scope because our team say it's going to be too expensive and going to take too long or whatever, yada, 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 did we promise anything in earlier marketing outings? Did we promise anything? I mean, if I'm a chip designer, did I promise anything to, let me just call Samsung. Samsung, huge phone developer. Did we promise anything to Samsung that we would include a certain functionality in the chip, but now, we don't have time anymore? So would they accept that?
That would be very,
that's.
it would be very unagile of them not to accept it, Ali.
Yes.
That's what I
interesting,
mean. So,
interesting thoughts, Ali. And may I pick up your line, your
please.
story line?
Yes.
I would like to throw in, trust is not given. Trust has to be earned, because that leads us to the last part of this dimension, release on demand, right? Finally, it's an outside-in perspective from a customer perspective. We have to deliver value, and we even have to release on demand. As you said, there are milestones, but we have to adapt to that, right? So what could be some of your experience in that regard when it comes to release on demand? I'm looking to my Swiss buddy, Niko.
I think I will move this story to the next episode, so I have to find a new one because it fits better. Release on demand. So it really forced me with this question to prepare myself better, because usually when I show it in the leading safe classes or implementing safe class, I just jump over it. Yeah, it's just some icons, etc. I think an important thing for me and my project, or my project. Sorry, Ollie. My mandates was being able to release to friendly customers, be able to have a second production, to give the software, give the product access, give access to people who are friendly to you. And so you get the box in a nice tone, not people calling and yelling at you, what have you done? So they have really nice people explaining this to you. So the possibility of dark releases, or the possibility to learn with Lean Startup, it's a really, really important one in my eyes.
Perfect. That means, if I'm listening carefully to you, Niko, it's with those friendly people also, how do we learn when we release, right? And that leads us back to what Mark brought up as a passion at the beginning of this episode. How about learning? Mark?
So it was funny preparing for this, because I think, Niko, I'm with you. If you think about the way release on demand usually turns up, it gets one slide, maybe two. And then when you actually think deeply about it, I literally got to a point when I was doing some prep work of going, oh man, it almost feels like we should do a whole episode on release on demand. And, I mean, my passion here is, and I'll always go to learning. And what a customer tells you they'll do and what they do are usually very different things. And you only find out when it's in their hands. Right? You can walk around the street with paper prototypes until you're blue in the face. You can do the UX interviews, but the truth is, when they get their mitts on it, what happens? And you've got to close that learning loop to make sure you haven't gone too far down the wrong path by the time that a customer chooses not to use it. But there's a flip side to this, and feels like Ali's we're talking about chips and electronics guy. I'm going to be talking about governments and organizations with huge brand concerns guy for a minute. Because this is the paranoia. The paranoia is, what about regulatory constraints? What about brand image? What about impact on frontline staff? You talk about Google deploying thousands of times a day, and a lot of the business stakeholders in this organization go, but that would destroy us, because every time we do X, I'll use an easy example. I was working with a bank that was migrating applications to the cloud, and they had to have the industry regulator sign off on each app they were moving to the cloud, through a sense of their comfort with the privacy and security risk of that particular application living in the cloud, right? This is real stuff. And so it doesn't matter how good you get at going, we're develop on Cadence, we're always live, we're deploying live multiple times a day. You've got to have the flexibility to be able to choose the way in which you make that available to people. And you can't decide to do that at the end. You get it because you think about it in the beginning, right? Right in the beginning, when your product managers are looking, going, how are we going to bring this thing to market incrementally? You've got to be looking through these lenses of going, okay, well, why did release on demand get in as a buzz phrase? It got in because business people kept going, we need control. We can't just have the technology people inflicting pain on us, right? I actually coached one organization where they had a change command center staffed with over 100 business staff, purely constructed to defend themselves from the pain that technology caused them by deploying whenever they felt like it. So its presence there is going, it's a business decision. How you go to market is important, but you've got to have the flip side to it, which is going to market too late is learning too late, and that's really expensive.
Especially
really
for a
can-
company that
Yeah.
pays with taxpayer money.
Yes.
Exactly. Or I can second that what you just said, Mark. I'm working with 2 clients now. One is producing aircraft. The other one is producing kitchen appliances, washing machines, right? A washing machine compared to an aircraft sounds easy, right? But even there you have regulations. You don't sell. You can damage your brand if you do the wrong stuff. And if you don't kind of bring in this overall view, like on a roadmap where you can start anticipate. And I see, for example, from my experience, roadmaps a useful artifact to apply this cadence as well. And the cadence might shift. It might be adaptable to where you are on the life cycle of a product, right? So I would like to. Mark, go for it.
Just one little thing, right? And we all kind of steered away from it when we chose the backing stories. And it was the thing which was like, oh, this should be a whole extra episode. And it's been the interesting journey as we look through the competencies and the dimensions, right? Is that each time you look at one of these dimensions, you go, I'm going to talk about X. And then you go, oh, no, that's in another one, right? And Niko's fallen victim again. He wanted to talk about dark releases, and that's another dimension. But then the other question you ask yourself is, what's buried in a dimension? Because if you look at the call out for the dimension, you've got release, stabilize and operate, measure and learn. And release, stabilize and operate, well, kind of that's been where we've all gone in our stories. Measure and learn is like the whole motivation for it. There's a whole craft and discipline in measure and learn. And, if you are taking a competency first view and you're going, what's important, and particularly if you're an SPC or a coach, right? Why would I want to release more frequently? It's about measure and learn. What might I measure and learn? How is being deliberate about that going to influence my strategy? It's a whole nother thing. And I, we could talk for another hour on that, but I just wanted to point it out. When you look at the dimension, don't skip it.
Yeah, maybe we should really introduce one of these not planned episodes talking about those issues. But to kind of concluding this dimension, let's go to the measure and grow, right? And you just set the springboard, Mark. It's about measure and learn. So we had different approaches here. We have Ali and Niko choosing one of the measure and grow items. And by the way, the list is huge, right? It's humongous, right? When I prepared, I thought, gosh, where should I start? And Ali and Niko, why did you choose each iteration? Our art demonstrates an integrated solution during the system demo. Let's go for it.
Niko,
Should
take
I
it away.
start? Yeah. Uh, everything was really important, but at the end I thought, oh, which one summarizes best the whole dimension? And what I want to have with release on demand and develop on Cadence, it's exactly what Mark said before. It's about the feedback loop. It's about learning, and the only way to learn is to show something in production. I don't care if you can deliver in time. If this thing is, oh, what's a nice word for shit? It's not usable. Then you want nothing. So I really have. I need a system demo, and I think that's the important thing. Showing that the thing works, that helps me, and that's the most important part for me. Ollie, you back me up.
Especially on the
Hopefully,
what is a nice
hopefully.
word for shit sentence. No, I completely agree. Can you integrate, and do you do that very frequently in a cadence? Yes, then that generates learning, and so forth, and so forth. Und so weiter, und so weiter.
Interesting. Okay. How not to produce garbage. When I went through the lists, I must admit, had my sticky to our art has clearly defined outcome metrics. Because my thinking was cadence might lead to a lot of output, but you miss those milestones. You miss those really valuable things. And then we had 2 weeks of preparation time. I was shifting it really to our art addresses bottlenecks in the value stream, because cadence for me is a helpful thing to detect those bottlenecks as soon as possible. And as I said before, when I talk about cadence, for me, it's less this mechanical cadence of 2 weeks or 10 to 12 weeks. We should talk about what is a feasible cadence. I'm looking to Ali, and I'm now working in those domains as well, right? Where we had find out in a value stream identification workshop that, hey, by the way, it's not hardware that is the bottleneck. It's maybe electronics or even software or a shared service not being available to produce a valuable output that could be used, and then to start learning. And that's when I moved my sticky to let's find the bottlenecks. And then in that cadence, moving from bottleneck to bottleneck, and that's the never-ending story for me. And that's also, as you said, Ali, sometimes it's annoying. Cleaning up garbage, not that much fun, but cleaning up in the end is really helpful. You have a tidy house. Mark, how can you back me up with that one?
I want to challenge you first, both of you. I want to challenge you first. Addressing bottleneck sounds a little bit like finger pointing. You're the bottleneck. I found the bottleneck. You're doing bad stuff. So it's not really the most important one, Mark.
I love pointing fingers, Niko.
Oh, perfect.
You've found the villain who's stopping Agile. Point the finger and throw a party. Right.
That's the Aussie way, right? It's more collaboration through the party, right?
No, look, being serious, and it was interesting listening to you, Stephan, because I went through exactly the same debate. And, if you pull it back and go, actually, the competency we're looking at is agile product delivery. If I have my product hat on, I always go back to, build the right thing and build the thing right, because it's no good being really efficient at building the wrong thing. And so that tension between am I building the right thing, clearly defined outcome metrics, and am I building the thing right and getting faster at building it, fixing bottlenecks, is a really interesting tension. And I went backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And I think it's one of those places where I think the name of the the name of the competency being agile product delivery, it's quite an interesting landscape question to me, because, customer centricity and design thinking, first dimension, yeah, right, that's what it's all about. But then we've got these two kind of execution cadence, DevOpsy things lumped into agile product delivery, which are not necessarily entirely product flavored in terms of the weight of what turns up in the comps. It's an interesting dilemma. So, when I boiled it back down, and I think this is where we've talked about this a few times on Measure and Grow debates, is if you're getting faster, right, and you'll get faster because you're about to address bottlenecks, until you get faster, there's no way you're going to get faster feedback. So it's kind of a 1-2 of like, are we fixing bottlenecks in the value stream? Because if I go back to my whole thing, get rid of the need for cadence, well, cadence helps you flush the bottlenecks and then you can respond to them and reduce the need for cadence. And it's like, okay, and then I want to stop worrying about that. And now we can worry about outcomes. But to be honest, I would never go without both. Ali, you're looking very challenged by that.
There's bottlenecks on the one hand, which I understand, but on the other hand, the inability to integrate work might indicate another bottleneck. So I think that one sort of encompasses more potential issues than just the focus on a bottleneck.
So I'm going to just rewind you for a minute, right? We'll stay in debate land for a second. The inability to integrate work regularly might be an example of a bottleneck, one of many, right? If I can do an integrated solution demo every 2 weeks, I've solved one of my bottlenecks. I wonder how many others are out there.
I think this is a typical chicken and an egg situation that we've sort of landed upon. Okay.
Or Easter bunny and egg.
Yeah, it's Easter time. Okay, guys, let's kind of conclude our Easter egg hunt. We have already a long list of Measure and Grow items, but if you would kind of try to summarize this dimension based on what we already discussed, is there something missing for you guys, or is there some aspect you would like to conclude on? Who would like to start?
For me, everything should have a purpose. So when I read the whole measurement, it was more about we have to do it just because we do it. And what I missed is there's a value behind of release on demand. And what I would like to have as a question is your PM product management, are they capable of saying numbers and prove it economically that release on demand makes sense? I think this would be a cool thing to measure because it has an impact and it has a payoff. So is your PM able to make this economic link on demand?
Cool, thanks, Niko. Ali, final thoughts about this dimension?
What would I measure? Is there an upward trend in the amount of cross-team or cross-engineering discipline integrations? That's what I would measure.
Thank you very much. Mark?
Probably no surprise from me. And really, this was encapsulating a few, because I think the other thing I'd have, looking at that huge list of Measure and Grows, that's like a lot of needles. I want a shorter list. So mine was our art relentlessly improves our use of cadence and events to optimize the flow of value.
My conclusion, based on preparation, based on a really valuable discussion, gents, a rhythm helps the orchestra perform at release day. And with that, talking stick back to Mark.
All right. Thank you, Stephan. Fun Easter egg hunt. And thank you very much for not making us imagine flavors of Easter eggs having something to do with cadence.
Next time, I'm the host of the next episode. So be careful what you say.
Oh, no.
So speaking of the next episode, there may be an interlude before the next episode, given the fact that we are all in Berlin for the SAFe Summit very soon. So
next week,
if everybody was actually getting into Berlin at a reasonable hour, we could probably just do it all in person on the Saturday. But you never know; we might get one out in the meantime. Otherwise, it might be a couple of weeks before we're back on the job. But when next we return, Niko will be hosting DevOps and the CD pipeline, and he's taken the gauntlet that's been thrown down to come up with an even nastier question than what kind of animal might a CD pipeline be. And you'll just have to wait and find out what the question is. On which note, that's been a wrap to episode 13.